Let me taste that thing between your legs, human. The words echo in Dennis Ross's mind as he backs against the cold metal wall of the specimen storage room. Petra, the pack-led female, advances with an eager glint in her eyes. Her curiosity about human anatomy has reached a fever pitch, and Dennis finds himself trapped between scientific duty and primal instinct. The narrow confines of the room leave little space for escape. Dennis's heart races as he attempts to maintain his professional composure. Petra, this isn't appropriate. We're here to conduct research, not to... His words catch in his throat as Petra's hand brushes against his thigh. But Dennis, how can we truly understand each other's species without intimate knowledge? Petra's voice is low, almost husky. The tension between them crackles like static electricity. Dennis's mind whirls. He's acutely aware of the importance of his mission aboard the pack-led research vessel, Clumsy Seeker. Earth's first official diplomatic mission to the pack-led homeworld is underway, and the success of interspecies relations hangs in the balance. As a xenobiologist, he's meant to be studying pack-led biology, not becoming the subject of study himself. Suddenly, Petra stumbles, her elbow connecting with a control panel. A piercing alarm blares through the ship. Dennis's eyes widen in panic. What have you done? Petra looks equally startled. I didn't mean to... The sound of approaching footsteps echoes down the corridor. Without thinking, Dennis grabs Petra's hand and pulls her toward a storage unit. They squeeze inside, bodies pressed together in the tight space. The door clicks shut just as the security team bursts into the room. In the darkness of their hiding place, Dennis can feel Petra's breath on his neck. The close proximity only intensifies the charged atmosphere between them. He struggles to focus on the dire situation at hand. Outside, voices filter through the thin walls of their sanctuary. The alarm originated from this room. Search everything. As the security team begins their methodical sweep, a new group enters. Dennis strains to hear their conversation. The human specimen has provided valuable data, one voice says. Their biology suggests several potential weaknesses we can exploit. Dennis's blood runs cold. He realizes with growing horror that his presence on the ship is part of a larger pack-led plan. The High Council views Earth as a long-term threat to their galactic influence and seeks to study human biology for vulnerabilities. The scientists continue their discussion, unaware of the hidden listeners. They detail plans to use the information against Earth, potentially compromising the ongoing diplomatic mission. Trapped in the storage unit with Petra, Dennis faces an impossible dilemma. He must find a way to warn Earth's diplomats without compromising his position or endangering Petra, who seems genuinely unaware of her people's true intentions. As the pack-led security team draws nearer to their hiding spot, Dennis weighs his options. The fate of Earth could rest on his next move. With Petra pressed against him in the cramped space, he realizes that the simple act of satisfying alien curiosity has spiraled into a crisis that could shape the future of human pack-led relations. The search continues, tensions mount, and Dennis knows that soon he'll be forced to make a decision that could change everything. The question remains, can he find a way to protect Earth, maintain diplomatic relations, and navigate the complex web of interspecies attraction he's become entangled in? The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the specimen storage room. Dennis held his breath, acutely aware of Petra's body pressed against his in the cramped confines of the storage unit. Her warm breath tickled his neck, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine. As the security team methodically searched the room, Dennis's mind raced. The overheard conversation had changed everything. Earth was in danger, and he was trapped on an alien ship with no way to warn his people. Suddenly, Petra shifted, her hand brushing against Dennis's chest. Their eyes met in the dim light filtering through the cracks of their hiding place. Dennis saw a mixture of fear and curiosity in her gaze, mirroring his own conflicted emotions. "Dennis," Petra whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had no idea about any of this, I swear." He nodded, believing her sincerity. "We need to find a way out of here," he murmured back. As if on cue, the voices outside began to fade. The security team was moving on, their search of the specimen storage room complete. Dennis and Petra waited a few more agonizing minutes before cautiously emerging from their hiding spot. Once out, Dennis turned to Petra. We need to warn Earth about the Pac-Led's plans. Is there any way we can access the ship's communication array? Petra's eyes widened, then narrowed in grit. She pulled out a small data pad from a pocket in her uniform. I think I can help with that. This contains detailed schematics of the ship. As Petra brought up a holographic display of the clumpy Seeker's layout, Dennis marveled at her willingness to assist him. It was a risky move that could be seen as betraying her own people, but Petra seemed genuinely horrified by what they had overheard. Using Petra's knowledge of Pac-Led technology, they formulated a plan to reach the communication array. They would need to navigate through several decks, avoiding security patrols and other crew members along the way. With Petra leading the way, they slipped out of the specimen storage room and into the dimly lit corridor. Every sound made Dennis flinch, expecting to be discovered at any moment. They ducked into alcoves and side passages whenever footsteps approached, their bodies once again pressed close in the narrow spaces. As they neared a junction, Petra suddenly pulled Dennis back, her grip tight on his arm. A moment later, Dr. Zoltan, the lead Pac-Led scientist, strode past their hiding spot. Dennis's heart pounded so loudly he was certain it would give them away. Once Dr. Zoltan had passed, Petra tugged Dennis towards a nearby laboratory. "Quick, in here!" she hissed. They slipped inside, the door sliding shut behind them with a soft hiss. Dennis turned to ask Petra why they had entered the lab, but the words died in his throat as he saw what lay before them. Row upon row of vials filled with a viscous, pale blue liquid lined the shelves. Each was carefully labeled with complex Pac-Led script that Dennis couldn't decipher, but he didn't need to read the labels to know what they were looking at. "The bioweapon," he breathed, a chill running down his spine. Petra nodded grimly. "This must be where they're developing it." Dennis approached the nearest shelf, his xenobiologist's mind already racing. If he could analyze the compound, perhaps he could find a way to neutralize it. It was a long shot, but it might be their best chance to protect Earth. "Petra, I need your help," Dennis said, turning to his unlikely ally. "Can you find me some equipment to analyze these samples?" Without hesitation, Petra began searching the lab, gathering various instruments and bringing them to Dennis. As he worked, she kept watch at the door, ready to warn him if anyone approached. Time seemed to stretch as Dennis pored over the bioweapon's molecular structure. His fingers flew over the alien equipment, his mind processing the complex data faster than he thought possible. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, he let out a triumphant exclamation. "I've found it! There's a flaw in the design. If I can just alter this sequence here—" Dennis muttered, more to himself than to Petra. With painstaking precision, Dennis began to modify the bioweapon structure. A single mistake could render his efforts useless, or worse, make the compound even more dangerous. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, acutely aware of the immense stakes. Petra watched him with a mixture of awe and admiration. She had never seen anyone work with such focused intensity before. As Dennis continued his delicate task, Petra found herself drawn to him in a way she hadn't expected. His dedication, his intelligence, his willingness to risk everything to save his people. It all combined to create an irresistible allure. Just as Dennis was making the final adjustments, a piercing alarm shattered the tense silence of the lab. Red lights began flashing, and a computerized voice announced a security breach. "They've detected us!" Petra cried, rushing to Dennis's side. "We need to go, now!" Dennis quickly finished his sabotage and stepped back from the workstation. He met Petra's gaze, seeing his own mix of fear and drive reflected in her eyes. Without a word, they both knew what they had to do next. They burst out of the lab and into the chaos of the corridor. Crew members were rushing about, responding to the alarm. In the confusion, Dennis and Petra managed to slip through relatively unnoticed, making their way towards the communication array. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Captain Grok, the imposing leader of the Pac-Led vessel. His eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of the human and his Pac-Led companion in a restricted area of the ship. "What are you doing here?" Captain Grok demanded, his voice a low growl. Dennis's mind raced, searching for a plausible explanation. He glanced at Petra, hoping for some inspiration. In that moment, he saw something in her eyes, a spark of quick thinking that matched his own. Captain, Dennis began, forcing his voice to remain steady, Petra and I are conducting an authorized cultural exchange. We were just on our way to contact Earth about our progress. He gestured to the datapad in Petra's hand, silently praying that it would be enough to convince the suspicious captain. Captain Grok's eyes narrowed further, his gaze flicking between Dennis, Petra, and the datapad. The tension in the air was palpable as they waited for his response. Finally, the captain spoke. Very well, but I'm not completely convinced. Lieutenant Kraz will accompany you to the communication array. A stocky pack-led officer stepped forward, his expression neutral but vigilant. Dennis and Petra exchanged a worried glance. Their plan had just become infinitely more complicated. As they made their way to the communication array, Dennis's mind whirled with possibilities. How could they warn Earth with Lieutenant Kraz watching their every move? The fate of his entire species might rest on his ability to outsmart their pack-led escort. Petra, sensing Dennis's distress, subtly squeezed his hand. The small gesture of support sent a surge of warmth through him, stealing his persistence. Together, they would find a way. They had to. The doors to the communication array slid open, revealing a room filled with complex alien technology. Dennis took a deep breath, knowing that what happened next could change the course of human history forever. Dennis stood before the communication array, his heart pounding. He glanced at Petra, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. Lieutenant Kraz loomed behind them, his presence a constant reminder of the precarious situation they were in. With practiced calm, Dennis began inputting commands into the alien console. His fingers danced across the unfamiliar controls as he crafted a carefully worded message to Earth's diplomatic team. He couldn't risk being too explicit, not with Kraz watching, but he had to convey the urgency of the situation. As he worked, Dennis wove in a series of seemingly innocuous phrases and numbers, a rudimentary code that he hoped Earth's cryptologists would decipher. It wasn't much, but it was all he could do under the circumstances. Transmission complete, Dennis announced, stepping back from the console. Lieutenant Kraz grunted, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the sent message. Very well. You will now return to your assigned quarters. As they were escorted out of the communication array, Dennis exchanged a meaningful look with Petra. They had bought themselves some time, but the danger was far from finished. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Dennis paced his quarters, every fiber of his being on high alert. Had Earth received the message? Would they understand the hidden warning? Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Dennis's head snapped up, his body tensing. This was it. Earth must have received the message and taken action. The door to his quarters slid open, revealing a breathless Petra. Quick, Dennis! We need to move! Without hesitation, Dennis followed her into the corridor. Chaos reigned as pack-led crew members rushed about, their usual slow demeanor replaced by frantic energy. Captain Grok has ordered a ship-wide security sweep, Petra explained as they hurried through the winding passages. We need to find somewhere to hide. They ducked into an alcove as a group of security officers thundered past. Dennis could feel Petra's rapid breathing, her body pressed close to his in the narrow space. When the coast was clear, they continued their frantic search for a safe haven. Here, Petra hissed, gesturing to a nondescript door. It's an unused maintenance bay. They slipped inside, the door sliding shut behind them with a soft hiss. The maintenance bay was cramped and dimly lit, filled with mysterious pack-lid machinery. Dennis and Petra pressed themselves against the far wall, listening intently for any sign of pursuit. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, Dennis became acutely aware of Petra's proximity. Her alien features, once so strange to him, now held an undeniable allure. He found himself drawn to the intelligence in her eyes, the tenacity in the set of her jaw. Petra met his gaze, and Dennis saw his own tumultuous emotions reflected there. The tension between them, built over days of shared danger and growing trust, reached a breaking point. In a moment of shared impulse, they leaned towards each other. Their lips met in a kiss that was at once awkward and electrifying. Dennis marveled at the alien sensation, so familiar yet so different from anything he had experienced before. The moment was shattered by a violent lurch of the ship. Dennis and Petra stumbled, breaking apart. Dennis's elbow connected with a nearby control panel, causing it to light up with a soft blue glow. To their astonishment, a hidden compartment in the wall slid open, revealing a cache of data storage devices. Dennis's eyes widened as he recognized the classified markings on the devices. "These are military documents," he breathed, reaching for the nearest one. Petra looked on in shock as Dennis began to scan through the information. His expression grew increasingly grim as he absorbed the contents. "This is worse than we thought," Dennis said, his voice tight with urgency. "The Packlids have been studying Earth for years. They've been gathering data on human biology, behavior, everything. The bioweapon is just the beginning. They've developed an entire arsenal of technologies designed to exploit human weaknesses." Petra's face paled. "I had no idea. Dennis, what can we do?" Dennis's mind raced, weighing their options. They couldn't stay hidden forever, and now they possessed information that could change the course of human-Packlid relations. "We need to get this information to Earth," he said firmly. "All of it. We can't rely on coded messages anymore. We need to transmit this data directly to the human diplomatic team." Petra nodded, her expression a mix of fear and perseverance. "It's risky, but I'll help you. We'll need to access the ship's main computer to transmit that much data." As they formulated their plan, the ship's alarms suddenly changed pitch. The new sound was more urgent, more insistent. "What's happening?" Dennis asked, tensing. Petra's eyes widened in realization. "It's a diplomatic alert. Your people must have received your warning. They're demanding answers from the High Council." A grim smile touched Dennis's lips. "Then we'd better move fast. This chaos might be our only chance to access the main computer without being detected." With renewed purpose, Dennis and Petra slipped out of the maintenance bay and into the pandemonium of the Packlid ship. As they navigated the confusion, Dennis clutched the stolen data devices close, knowing that the fate of Earth might very well rest in his hands. Hands might hold the key to preventing an interstellar war. As they raced through the corridors, alarms blaring around them, Dennis spotted an emergency escape pod bay. "There!" he shouted, pulling Petra towards it. They stumbled into the small pod, Dennis's fingers flying over the controls as he initiated the launch sequence. With a violent jerk, the pod detached from the Packlid ship and shot into space. "We made it," Petra breathed, her eyes wide as she stared out the viewport at the rapidly shrinking Packlid vessel. But their relief was short-lived. A warning light flashed on the control panel, accompanied by a shrill beep. Dennis's heart sank as he realized the Packlid ship was in pursuit. "They're gaining on us," he said, frantically trying to coax more speed from the small craft. Petra leaned over his shoulder, her alien features creased with concentration. "The human diplomatic ship. Can we reach it?" Dennis nodded, setting a course for the last known coordinates of the Earth vessel. As they raced through the void, the Pack-led ship loomed larger in their rear viewport. Suddenly, a blast of energy struck their pod, rocking it violently. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as systems began to fail. "We've lost propulsion," Dennis said, his voice tight with fear and frustration. He began rerouting power, drawing on every scrap of scientific knowledge he possessed to keep them on course. Petra, meanwhile, focused on the communication array. "I'm trying to boost our distress signal," she said, her fingers dancing over the alien controls with surprising dexterity. "If I can just... There! I've amplified it. Let's hope your people can hear us." As if in answer to her words, a new ship appeared on their sensors, the human diplomatic vessel. Dennis felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by the realization that they were still in grave danger. The Pack-led ship opened fire again, this time targeting both the escape pod and the approaching human vessel. Dennis and Petra were thrown about as their small craft bucked and spun under the assault. "Shields at critical levels," Dennis reported, his voice strained. "We can't take much more of this." Petra turned to him, her alien eyes filled with an emotion Dennis couldn't quite decipher. "Dennis," she said softly, "if these are to be our final moments, I want you to know." Her words were cut off as another blast rocked their pod. Systems failed in cascading waves, and Dennis knew with grim certainty that they were out of time. Just then, a new energy signature appeared on their sensors. A small craft had launched from the human ship and was racing towards them. "A rescue shuttle," Dennis breathed, hardly daring to hope. The shuttle closed the distance rapidly, maneuvering between the failing escape pod and the attacking pack-led vessel. A gentle vibration thrummed through the pod as the shuttle locked on with a tractor beam. "They've got us," Dennis said, sagging with relief. But their ordeal wasn't over yet. The pack-led ship intensified its attack, energy beams lancing out at both the pod and the rescue shuttle. Dennis and Petra clung to each other as their small craft shuddered under the assault. Through the viewport, Dennis saw the human diplomatic ship move to intercept, its weapons blazing as it engaged the pack-led vessel. The space around them lit up with energy discharges as the two ships clashed. Despite the ongoing battle, the rescue shuttle managed to pull them to safety. As they were drawn into the shuttle's docking bay, Dennis turned to Petra. Their eyes met, a wealth of unspoken emotion passing between them. "We made it," Dennis said softly, reaching out to touch Petra's face. She leaned into his touch, a small smile playing on her alien features. "Together," she replied. As the docking bay doors sealed behind them, Dennis knew that their adventure was not nearly finished. They had escaped the immediate danger, but the stolen data they carried and the knowledge of the pack-led bioweapon would have far-reaching consequences. The shuttle's crew swarmed around them, medical personnel checking for injuries, while security officers secured the area. Dennis quickly briefed them on the situation, emphasizing the urgency of the information they carried. As they were escorted deeper into the human ship, Dennis couldn't help but notice the curious and sometimes wary glances directed at Petra. He stayed close to her, offering silent support as they navigated this new environment. They were led to the medical bay, where Dr. Sarah Chen, the chief medical officer, greeted them. "Welcome aboard," she said, her eyes lingering curiously on Petra. "Let's get you both checked out." As Dr. Chen began her examination, Dennis realized that this was likely the first official medical study of pack-led physiology. He watched with interest as the doctor's expression shifted from professional detachment to growing fascination. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen murmured, studying her instruments. "The similarities between your physiologies. It's almost as if—" Her words were cut off as Commander Jack Harper strode into the medical bay. "Dr. Chen, I need to debrief our guests immediately," he said, his tone brooking no argument. As Dennis prepared to recount his experiences, he caught Petra's eye. The look they shared was one of shared commitment and growing affection. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together. Whatever the future held, they would face it as one. As the medical team finished their examinations, Commander Harper approached Dennis and Petra. His stern expression softened slightly as he took in their exhausted but determined faces. "We're preparing to depart for the neutral Zor space station," he informed them. "Captain Rodriguez wants to brief you both before we leave." Dennis nodded, relief washing over him at the thought of finally making progress. He glanced at Petra, noting the tension in her shoulders. "Will Petra be joining us?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Commander Harper's eyes narrowed as he studied the pack-led woman. After a moment of consideration, he nodded. "Captain Rodriguez believes her insider knowledge could be valuable. And—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Having a cooperative pack-led with us could send an important message." Petra's eyes widened in surprise, and Dennis felt a wave of gratitude towards the captain. He reached out and squeezed Petra's hand, offering a reassuring smile. As they made their way to the bridge, Dennis noticed the curious glances from the human crew members. Some were openly hostile towards Petra, while others seemed merely intrigued. He stayed close to her, silently offering support. Captain Rodriguez greeted them on the bridge, her piercing gaze taking in both Dennis and Petra. "I hope you understand the gravity of the situation," she said without preamble. "The information you've brought us could prevent an interstellar war, but it could just as easily ignite one if not handled properly." Dennis nodded solemnly. "We understand, Captain. We're ready to help in any way we can." The captain's expression softened slightly. "Good. We'll be departing for the Zor station shortly. I expect both of you to be prepared for intense negotiations." As they approached the Zor station, Dennis and Petra stood at a viewport, taking in the impressive sight. The massive wheel-shaped structure rotated slowly in space, its outer ring dotted with docked vessels of various alien designs. I've never seen anything like it, Petra breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Dennis found himself captivated not by the station, but by the play of starlight across Petra's features. He marveled at how quickly his perception of her had changed, from alien other to something more. Their moment of quiet awe was interrupted by Commander Harper. "We're preparing to dock," he announced. "Get ready to disembark." As they stepped onto the Zor station, Dennis was struck by the diversity of life forms bustling through the docking bay. Towering, multi-limbed beings brushed past diminutive creatures encased in environment suits. The air was filled with a cacophony of languages, some beyond the capacity of human vocal cords to replicate. Their group was met by the Zor mediators, tall, ethereal beings with iridescent skin and multiple eyes. Dennis found it difficult to focus on them directly, as their forms seemed to shimmer and shift in his peripheral vision. "Welcome," one of the Zor said, its voice a melodious hum that seemed to resonate in Dennis's chest. "We will escort you to the conference room." As they followed the Zor through winding corridors, Dennis felt a growing sense of unease. The magnitude of what they were about to do, confront the pack-led leadership with evidence of their bioweapon program, was starting to sink in. They entered a large circular conference room. The pack-led delegation was already present, with Captain Grok and Dr. Zoltan at its head. Dennis felt Petra stiffen beside him at the sight of her former leaders. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her posture radiating authority. "Captain Grok," she said, her voice cool and measured, "we have evidence of your bioweapon program and covert surveillance of Earth. We're here to address these violations of interstellar law." Captain Grok's face contorted in a mixture of rage and fear. "Lies!" he bellowed, pounding his fist on the table. "You fabricate these accusations to justify your own aggression." As the debate escalated, Dennis found himself drawn into the fray. He presented the data they had discovered, explaining the intricacies of the pack-led research. Petra stood beside him, offering clarifications on pack-led technology and corroborating his claims. The negotiations stretched on, growing increasingly heated. During a recess, Dennis and Petra slipped away to catch their breath. They found a quiet alcove off a side corridor, away from the prying eyes of both delegations. "Are you okay?" Dennis asked softly, noting the strain on Petra's face. She nodded, but her eyes were troubled. "I never imagined I'd be in this position," she confessed. "Betraying my people, yet trying to save them from themselves." Dennis reached out, gently taking her hand. "You're doing the right thing," he assured her. "We both are." Their moment of intimacy was shattered by movement at the end of the corridor. Dennis tensed, spotting a pack-led crew member watching them intently. "We're being followed," he whispered to Petra. They alerted Commander Harper, who quickly organized a security team. The suspicious pack-led was apprehended, and under questioning revealed himself to be part of the splinter group seeking war with humanity. As the negotiations resumed, this new information added fuel to the already volatile situation. The revelation caused visible cracks in the pack-led delegation, with some members openly questioning their leadership. Captain Grok, his face mottled with rage, suddenly stood. "Enough of this farce!" he roared, reaching into his pocket. Dennis's heart leapt into his throat as he recognized the device Grok was holding, a dispersal mechanism for the bioweapon. Time seemed to slow as Grok's finger moved towards the activation switch. Without thinking, Dennis launched himself across the table, Petra right beside him. Their combined knowledge of pack-led technology and human biology allowed them to target the device's weak points. In a frantic struggle, they managed to neutralize it before it could release its deadly contents. As security forces subdued Captain Grok, Dennis found himself standing in the center of the chaos, breathing heavily. He looked at Petra, saw the same mix of fear and exhilaration in her eyes that he felt coursing through his veins. In the stunned silence that followed, a new voice spoke up. "I believe," said Counselor Vix, stepping forward from the pack-led delegation, "that it is time for new leadership and a new approach to our relations with humanity." As Vix began to speak of peace and cooperation, Dennis felt a spark of hope. He turned to Petra, saw his own cautious optimism reflected in her alien features. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not just as individuals, but as a symbol of what humans and Pakleds could accomplish in harmony. Harmony. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense but hopeful, as both human and Pakled delegations began to consider the possibilities of a new era of cooperation. However, this fragile peace was soon interrupted by an urgent message from the Zor mediators. Captain Rodriguez's communicator chirped, drawing everyone's attention. "Captain, we've detected an unauthorized transmission originating from within the station." The Zor representative's melodious voice resonated. "The signal appears to contain classified information about both human and Pakled vulnerabilities." The room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew between the two delegations, threatening to undo the progress they had made. Dennis caught Petra's eye, a silent understanding passing between them. "Captain," Dennis said, stepping forward, "Petra and I might be able to help. We have a unique combination of skills that could be useful in tracking down the source of this transmission." Captain Rodriguez's eyes narrowed as she considered the proposal. "It's risky," she said, her voice low, "but you two have proven yourselves capable. Very well, proceed with caution." As Dennis and Petra slipped out of the conference room, they could hear the heated discussions resuming behind them. The corridors of the Zor station buzzed with activity, alien life forms of all shapes and sizes going about their business. "We should start by accessing the station's communication logs," Petra suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we can isolate the frequency of the transmission, we might be able to trace it back to its source." Dennis nodded, impressed once again by Petra's technical knowledge. They made their way to a public terminal where Dennis used his diplomatic credentials to gain access to the station's systems. As they pored over the data, a pattern began to emerge. "Look!" Dennis pointed to a series of irregular spikes in the transmission log. "These don't match any known communication protocols." Petra leaned in, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. "You're right, it's a Pakled encryption method, but it's been modified. Whoever sent this message didn't want it to be easily traceable." Their investigation led them through the labyrinthine corridors of the station, each clue bringing them closer to the source of the transmission. They passed through bustling marketplaces, filled with exotic goods from across the galaxy, and quiet, dimly lit maintenance tunnels where the hum of the station's machinery was the only sound. As they entered a restricted area of the station, Dennis felt a growing sense of unease. The corridor ahead was eerily quiet, the ambient noise of the station muffled by thick bulkheads. "We're close," Petra whispered, her eyes darting from side to side. Suddenly, a figure emerged from a shadowy alcove. Dennis recognized him as one of the junior members of the Pakled delegation. The Pakled's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with purpose as he reached for a weapon. Dennis reacted instinctively, drawing on his knowledge of Pakled physiology. He lunged forward, striking a precise point on the Pakled's arm that caused his fingers to spasm, dropping the weapon. Petra moved in swiftly, using her own strength to restrain their adversary. "Why?" she demanded, her voice a mix of anger and disappointment. The captured spy glared at them defiantly. "The old ways are the strong ways," he spat. "This talk of peace will make us weak." As Dennis secured the spy, Petra accessed a nearby terminal. "The transmission was sent from here," she confirmed, "but I can't determine the intended recipient." Their victory was short-lived, however. As they prepared to return to the conference room with their captive, Dennis caught a fragment of conversation from a nearby chamber. Curious, he gestured for Petra to listen. "Texa must act now," an unfamiliar voice hissed. "If the humans and Pakleds form an alliance, it will shift the balance of power in this sector." Dennis and Petra exchanged alarmed glances. They had stumbled upon something much bigger than they had anticipated. "We'll use the spatial anomaly generator," another voice chimed in. "It will disrupt their communications and damage their ships. They'll be too busy blaming each other to realize what really happened." Realizing the gravity of the situation, Dennis and Petra knew they had to act fast. They had uncovered not just a Pakled splinter group, but a conspiracy involving multiple alien races seeking to sabotage the negotiations. As they raced back to the conference room, their minds whirled with the implications of what they had discovered. The future of human-Pakled relations hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could prevent an impending disaster. Bursting into the conference room, Dennis and Petra found the negotiations at a critical juncture. All eyes turned to them as they entered, dragging the captured spy and carrying the weight of their newly acquired knowledge. "Captain Rodriguez, Counselor Vix," Dennis said, his voice urgent. "We've uncovered a plot that threatens both our species. We need to act now." As they began to explain their findings, Dennis and Petra knew that their next actions would shape the future of interstellar relations. The real challenge was just beginning. Beginning. The urgency in Dennis's voice silenced the room as all eyes turned to them. "We've uncovered a plot far more complex than we initially thought," Dennis continued, his words tumbling out rapidly. "There's an artificial spatial anomaly being created as we speak, designed to disrupt our communications and damage our ships." Captain Rodriguez's brow furrowed. "How certain are you of this?" Petra stepped forward, her iridescent skin shimmering under the conference room lights. "We intercepted a conversation discussing the use of a spatial anomaly generator. The intent is to sow discord between our species." The room erupted into a flurry of concerned murmurs. Counselor Vix, the pack-led who had earlier advocated for peace, raised his voice above the commotion. "We must act swiftly and decisively. This threat concerns both our peoples." Captain Rodriguez nodded, her face set with tenacity. "Agreed. We'll need a team to investigate and potentially neutralize this anomaly." Dennis and Petra exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. "We volunteer," Dennis said, his voice steady. "As do I," Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a human astrophysicist, chimed in from the back of the room. Within minutes, a mixed human pack-led team was assembled. Joining Dennis, Petra, and Lieutenant Chen were Ensign Miguel Rodriguez, a human engineer, Technician Zira, a female pack-led expert in energy systems, and Navigator Klotz, a male pack-led specialist in spatial phenomena. As the team hurried towards the docking bay, Dennis felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The weight of their mission pressed down on him, but Petra's presence at his side was reassuring. They boarded a sleek shuttle, its interior a blend of human and pack-led technology. As the airlock sealed behind them, Dennis took a deep breath, centering himself for the task ahead. The shuttle detached from the Zor station, streaking away into the star-studded blackness of space. Dennis settled into the co-pilot seat beside Petra, who skillfully maneuvered the craft towards the coordinates where the anomaly was predicted to form. As they neared their destination, the shuttle's sensors began to pick up unusual energy fluctuations. Dennis leaned forward, studying the readouts intently. Something about the patterns tickled at the back of his mind, a half-remembered piece of information from his xenobiology studies. "These energy patterns," he muttered almost to himself, "they're reminiscent of organic neural networks." Petra turned to him, her alien features creased with curiosity. "What are you suggesting?" Dennis's eyes widened as the realization hit him. This anomaly, it might not be artificial at all. It could be alive. The implications of his words rippled through the shuttle's cabin. Lieutenant Chen moved to verify Dennis's observations, her fingers flying over the sensor controls. "He's right," she confirmed, her voice tight with excitement and trepidation. "These patterns are consistent with highly complex organic systems." Ensign Rodriguez spoke up from his station. "If it's alive, how do we approach it? We can't just try to shut it down or destroy it." Before anyone could respond, the shuttle was rocked by a wave of turbulence. Petra's hands danced over the controls, fighting to keep the craft stable. "Everyone, secure yourselves," she called out. "We're entering the anomaly's field of influence." The team sprang into action, humans and pack-leds working in tandem to reinforce the shuttle's shields and stabilize its systems. Dennis found himself working alongside Technician Zira, their different approaches to problem-solving, complementing each other perfectly. As the turbulence increased, Dennis glanced at Petra. Despite the chaos around them, he was struck by how in sync they were, anticipating each other's needs and actions without a word. Suddenly, the view screen flared with blinding light. As their eyes adjusted, a collective gasp echoed through the cabin. Before them swirled a massive vortex of energy, its tendrils reaching out towards their shuttle like curious fingers. The shuttle's instruments went haywire, screens flickering with gibberish data. "We've lost communication with both fleets," Ensign Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. Dennis's mind raced, drawing connections between their observations and his xenobiological knowledge. "We need to attempt communication," he said, an idea forming. "If we combine human biosignaling technology with Pac-led energy manipulation techniques, we might be able to establish a connection." Petra nodded, already understanding his train of thought. "It's worth a try. Zira, Klotz, we'll need your expertise." As the team scrambled to implement Dennis's plan, the anomaly seemed to respond to their efforts. The energy vortex pulsed, its colors shifting in mesmerizing patterns. Suddenly, the shuttle was enveloped in a cocoon of shimmering energy. Instead of the destruction they feared, the crew found themselves immersed in a shared vision. Dennis felt Petra's hand grip his tightly, as their minds were filled with images of a highly advanced alien race. "We are the Quorin," a collective voice resonated in their thoughts. "We have been observing your conflict, and we decided to intervene." The vision unfolded, revealing the Quorin's purpose in creating the anomaly. It was a test designed to force cooperation between humans and Pac-lids, to prove their potential for peaceful coexistence. As the vision faded and the anomaly released its hold on the shuttle, Dennis and Petra found themselves facing an unexpected choice. The Quorin had offered to share their advanced knowledge with both species, but with a significant condition attached. Dennis looked at Petra, seeing the same mix of excitement and uncertainty in her eyes that he felt. They had been asked to become ambassadors for a new joint human Pac-led initiative, using their relationship as a model for future cooperation. As the shuttle began its return journey to the Zor station, the implications of their encounter burdened immensely on the crew. Dennis and Petra sat close together, their minds whirling with the magnitude of the decision before them. "What do you think?" Dennis asked softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the shuttle's engines. Petra's gaze met his, her alien eyes filled with a warmth that made his heart skip. "It's a huge responsibility," she replied, "but think of the difference we could make." Their conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Chen. "We're approaching the Zor station," she announced. "Both the human and Pac-led ships are hailing us." Dennis took a deep breath, straightening in his seat. As the shuttle docked, he knew that the report they were about to give would change everything. He glanced at Petra one last time before the airlock opened, drawing strength from her presence. Together they stepped out to face Captain Rodriguez and Counselor Vix, ready to share the knowledge that could reshape the future of both their species and their own lives. As the airlock hissed open, Dennis and Petra stepped onto the familiar deck of the Zor station, their minds still reeling from the encounter with the Quorin. Captain Rodriguez and Counselor Vix stood waiting, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. "Report," Captain Rodriguez said, her voice tight with anticipation. Dennis took a deep breath, glancing at Petra before speaking. "Captain, Counselor, we've made contact with an advanced alien race called the Quorin. They created the anomaly as a test of our ability to cooperate." Petra continued, her iridescent skin shimmering under the station's lights. "They've offered to share their knowledge with both our species, but there's a condition. They want us," she gestured between herself and Dennis, "to become ambassadors for a joint human Pac-led initiative." The revelation sent a ripple of murmurs through the gathered delegates. Captain Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up, while Counselor Vix's facial tentacles twitched with excitement. "This changes everything," Counselor Vix said, his voice filled with awe. Captain Rodriguez nodded, her mind already racing with the implications. "We need to discuss this further. Let's reconvene in the main conference room." As they made their way through the station's corridors, Dennis felt the weight of countless eyes upon them. News of their encounter had spread quickly, and both humans and Pac-lids alike looked to them with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The conference room buzzed with activity as delegates from both species engaged in heated discussions. Dennis and Petra found themselves at the center of attention, fielding questions from all sides. "What exactly did these Quorin offer?" a human diplomat asked, leaning forward eagerly. "How can we trust their intentions?" a Pac-led representative countered, his voice infused with suspicion. Dennis raised his hands, trying to calm the growing clamor. "The Quorin's offer is genuine, but it comes with great responsibility. They see our cooperation as a model for future interstellar relations." Petra nodded, adding, "Their knowledge could advance both our species by centuries, but we must consider the implications carefully." As the debates intensified, the Zor mediators stepped forward. Their tall, slender forms towered over the other delegates as they raised their voices for attention. "In light of these extraordinary circumstances," the lead mediator announced, "we propose extending this conference. We believe it would be beneficial to invite representatives from other spacefaring races to discuss the implications of the Quorin's involvement." Captain Rodriguez and Counselor Vix exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. "A broader perspective could be invaluable," Rodriguez said. As preparations for the extended conference began, Dennis and Petra found themselves tasked with creating a joint presentation on their experiences. They retreated to a small workroom, surrounded by data pads and holographic displays. Hours turned into days as they worked tirelessly, recounting every detail of their encounter with the Quorin. Their close proximity reignited the spark between them, but it also brought their differences into sharp focus. "We can't ignore the potential risks," Dennis argued, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "The Quorin's offer could fundamentally alter the balance of power in this sector." Petra's eyes flashed with commitment. "But think of the advancements we could make, the lives we could improve. We have a chance to bridge the gap between our species in ways we never thought possible." Their disagreements often led to heated debates, but they always found a way to compromise, their teamwork growing stronger with each passing day. As they delved deeper into the station's databases, cross-referencing their experiences with known galactic phenomena, Dennis noticed an anomaly in the data streams. "Petra, look at this," he called, pointing to a flickering holographic display. "There's a hidden subroutine buried in the station's archives." Petra leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the code. With a few deft movements, she bypassed the security protocols, revealing a cache of encrypted data. As they decrypted the files, their eyes widened in shock. The information revealed previous contact between the Zor and the Quorin, a secret kept from all other species. "This changes everything," Dennis whispered, his mind racing with the implications. Petra nodded gravely. "We need to inform the others, but we must be careful. This could destabilize the entire conference." As they prepared to share their discovery, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow as panicked voices echoed through the communication systems. "Attention all delegates," a frantic voice announced. "A biohazard has been detected in the station's air circulation system. Please remain calm and follow emergency protocols." Dennis's heart raced as he recognized the implications. "It's a bioweapon," he said, turning to Petra. "We need to act fast." Without hesitation, they sprinted towards the environmental control room, their minds already working on a potential countermeasure. As they ran, they could hear the sounds of chaos erupting throughout the station. Shouts of fear, the pounding of feet, and the hiss of emergency airlocks sealing. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of Zor security officers. "Halt!" one of them commanded, raising a weapon. Dennis raised his hands, speaking quickly. "We can help. I'm a xenobiologist, and Petra has extensive knowledge of pack-led physiology. We might be able to neutralize the bioweapon." The security officer hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Follow me, but be warned, we'll be watching you closely." As they made their way through restricted areas of the station, Dennis and Petra exchanged worried glances. The hidden laboratories and advanced technology they glimpsed raised even more questions about the Zor's true capabilities and intentions. Finally, they reached the central environmental control room. Inside, they found a group of pack-led saboteurs, desperately trying to override the station's systems. "Stop!" Petra shouted, her voice carrying a strength that made even the saboteurs pause. In that moment of hesitation, Dennis and Petra sprang into action. Drawing on their combined knowledge and the information they had gleaned about Zor technology, they engaged in a frantic battle of wits and reflexes. Dennis targeted the environmental controls, his fingers flying over the alien interface as he worked to isolate and neutralize the bioweapon. Petra, meanwhile, used her strength and agility to keep the saboteurs at bay, her movements a blur of precision and power. As they fought, alarms continued to blare, and the station shuddered ominously around them. The struggle had damaged critical systems, and now the entire structure was at risk. "Dennis," Petra called out, her voice strained as she grappled with a pack lid twice her size. "We're losing orbital stability." Dennis's mind raced as he finished inputting the final sequences to neutralize the bioweapon. He knew that their work was nowhere near the end. Now they faced an even greater challenge. As the station's alarms reached a fever pitch, Dennis and Petra shared a look of tenacity. They had overcome one crisis, but an even greater one loomed before them. The fate of the station, and perhaps the future of interstellar relations, now rested in their hands. Hands. The station's alarms blared incessantly, a cacophonous reminder of the crisis at hand. Dennis and Petra exchanged a determined look, their earlier disagreements forgotten in the face of impending disaster. "We need to stabilize the orbital decay," Dennis shouted over the din. "But how?" Petra's eyes lit up with an idea. "The environmental control systems. If we can reroute power from non-essential areas, we might buy ourselves some time." They raced through the corridors, their makeshift team of humans and pack leads following close behind. As they ran, Dennis noticed unfamiliar panels and interfaces lining the walls. Technology far more advanced than anything the Zor had previously revealed. "Petra, look," he said, gesturing to a sleek, pulsing console. "This isn't standard Zor tech. It's like nothing I've ever seen." Petra's brow furrowed as she examined the alien interface. "You're right. This is way beyond what we thought the Zor were capable of." They reached the environmental control room where chaos reigned. Screens flickered with warning messages, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of overheating circuitry. "Everyone, listen up," Dennis called out. "We need to interface with these systems quickly. Humans, focus on power redistribution. Pack leads, your technical expertise is crucial. Work on stabilizing the life support systems." As the team sprang into action, Dennis and Petra found themselves grappling with the unfamiliar technology. They combined their knowledge, human intuition melding with pack-led technical skill, to decipher the complex systems. "There!" Petra exclaimed, her fingers flying over a holographic interface. "I've managed to reroute power from the lower levels. It should buy us some time." Dennis nodded, his eyes scanning the readouts. "Good work, but we're not out of the woods yet. The orbital decay is still accelerating." Suddenly, a panel on the far wall slid open, revealing a hidden passage. Dennis and Petra shared a look of surprise before cautiously approaching the opening. "Should we?" Dennis asked, hesitation clear in his voice. Petra nodded firmly. "We have to. The answer might be down there." They descended into the bowels of the station, the passage leading them deeper than they'd ever been before. The air grew cooler, and the walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. At last, they emerged into a vast chamber, its center dominated by a massive structure that could only be described as a quantum computer. Its crystalline architecture pulsed with light, filling the room with a soft, ethereal glow. "This is Quorin technology," Petra breathed, her eyes wide with awe. "The Zor must have been reverse engineering it for years." Dennis approached the computer, his hand hovering over its shimmering surface. "If we can figure out how to use this, we might be able to save the station." As his fingers made contact with the interface, a surge of energy coursed through him. Petra rushed to his side, grasping his other hand, and suddenly they were both connected to the quantum computer. A holographic figure materialized before them, a Quorin representative, its form shifting and flowing like liquid starlight. It spoke directly into their minds, its voice resonating with ancient wisdom. "You have reached the final stage of our test," the Quorin explained. "Everything that has transpired, the conflict, the station's instability, was designed to evaluate your species' capacity for cooperation." Dennis and Petra listened in stunned silence as the hologram revealed the true nature of their situation. The Quorin's search for worthy species to join a galactic federation, the elaborate test, the potential for human and pack-led advancement. It was almost too much to comprehend. "Now," the Quorin continued, "you face the ultimate challenge. This quantum computer can either save this station and all aboard it, or transmit a vast database of advanced knowledge to your homeworlds. The power required means you cannot do both before the station's orbit fails completely. You must choose. The weight of the decision pressed down on Dennis and Petra. They could feel the station shuddering around them, time slipping away with each passing second. We can't sacrifice everyone on this station, Petra argued, her voice filled with emotion. Dennis nodded, his mind racing. But think of what that knowledge could do for our people. For all people. As they debated, a spark of inspiration struck Dennis. Wait, what if we split the difference? Use the quantum computer to boost a distress signal to both our fleets, while simultaneously transmitting a portion of the database. Petra's eyes lit up. It's risky, but it might work. We'd need perfect coordination between our species. They quickly divided their team, sending humans to contact the Earth fleet and pack leads to reach out to their ships. Dennis and Petra remained with the quantum computer, working feverishly to balance the power distribution. As they interfaced with the alien technology, they found their minds and bodies intertwining with the machine. Visions of possible futures flashed before their eyes. Success, failure, and everything in between. Above them, the station descended further into chaos. News of the Quorin test spread, causing some delegates to panic while others attempted to seize control. Through it all, Dennis and Petra's team worked tirelessly, buying them precious time. Their bodies weakened as the quantum computer drained their energy, but their minds remained linked, focused on their desperate plan. In the space around the station, ships from both Earth and the pack-led homeworld began to appear, responding to the distress call. With the last of their strength, Dennis and Petra initiated the final sequence. The quantum computer surged with power, the station trembling around them. As their consciousness began to fade, they clung to each other and to hope, knowing that the fate of two species now hung in the balance. Balance. As their consciousness began to fade, they clung to each other and to hope, knowing that the fate of two species now hung in the delicate equilibrium of their actions. Suddenly, the station's power grid surged wildly. The quantum computer's neural interface crackled with energy, and Dennis felt his mind expanding, merging with Petra's in a way he had never experienced before. Their thoughts intertwined, memories and knowledge flowing between them like quicksilver. "Petra," Dennis gasped, his voice barely audible over the hum of the computer. "I can feel your thoughts. It's, incredible." Petra's eyes widened in astonishment. "I feel it too. It's as if our minds have become one." With their newfound connection, they worked in perfect synchronization, adjusting power distribution with lightning speed. Dennis's human intuition melded seamlessly with Petra's pack-led technical expertise, allowing them to navigate the complex systems with unprecedented efficiency. Above them, the station shuddered violently. Alarms blared as large sections of the outer hull breached, exposing several decks to the vacuum of space. The quantum computer chamber remained intact, protected deep within the station's core, but they were now cut off from the rest of the facility. Through their mental link, Dennis and Petra became aware of the unfolding chaos. They saw human and pack-led ships arriving, working together to stabilize the station's failing orbit. Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed in their shared consciousness as he coordinated with Counselor Vix of the pack-led fleet. "We need to buy them more time," Petra thought, her tenacity flowing through their connection. Dennis nodded, his fingers flying over the holographic interface. "And we need to warn them about the Zor's hidden technologies. Some of these experiments could tear apart the fabric of space-time itself." As they worked, they became aware of the other alien delegates' reactions to the crisis. Some were fleeing in panic, while others attempted to secure their own technologies and secrets. A few opportunistic species were trying to take advantage of the chaos, seeking to steal advanced tech for themselves. The station's structural integrity continued to deteriorate. Warning messages flashed across the quantum computer's displays, indicating that its power core was becoming unstable. "Dennis," Petra's thought cut through their shared consciousness. "If we don't shut down the computer soon, it could create a localized singularity. We'd destroy everything we're trying to save." Dennis's mind raced, calculating their options. "But if we shut it down, we'll be trapped here, and we'll lose our connection." They shared a moment of silent communication, emotions flowing between them with perfect clarity. In that instant, they both understood the weight of their decision and the depth of their bond. "We have to do it," they thought in unison. With unbreakable spirit, they diverted the last of the computer's power to transmit a final burst of data to both fleets. The transmission contained not only the promised Quorin knowledge, but also a warning about the Zor's dangerous technologies and instructions for their containment. As the power drained from the quantum computer, Dennis and Petra felt their mental link beginning to fade. They clung to the connection, savoring their last moments of shared consciousness. "I'll find you," Dennis promised, his thoughts intertwining with Petra's. "And I'll be waiting," she responded, her emotions washing over him like a warm embrace. With a final surge of effort, they initiated the shutdown sequence. The quantum computer's crystalline structure dimmed, and the ethereal glow that had filled the chamber began to fade. In the last moments before their connection severed, they managed to send out a final distress signal, pinpointing their location in the station's core. The mental link dissolved, leaving Dennis and Petra alone in their own minds once more. They found themselves back in their physical bodies, exhausted and disoriented. The chamber around them creaked and groaned as the station's structural integrity continued to fail. In the darkness, Dennis reached out and found Petra's hand, their fingers intertwined, a physical echo of their recent mental connection. Despite the uncertainty of their situation, they both felt a profound sense of change. Their shared experience had transformed their relationship into something deeper and more significant than either of them could have imagined. "What do we do now?" Petra whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the failing station. Dennis squeezed her hand, his mind already working on their next move. "We survive. We find a way out of here. And then we make sure the galaxy understands what really happened here today." As they sat in the darkness of the failing core, surrounded by the remnants of Quorin technology and Zor secrets, Dennis and Petra knew that their adventure was just the beginning. The true test of their newfound bond, of human pack-led cooperation, and of the galaxy's response to the revelations about the Zor and the Quorin, was only just beginning. The true test of their newfound bond, of human pack-led cooperation, and of the galaxy's response to the revelations about the Zor and the Quorin, was only just starting. A violent tremor shook the chamber, jolting Dennis and Petra from their moment of reflection. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, reminding them of their precarious situation. "We need to move," Dennis said, his voice urgent but steady. He helped Petra to her feet, supporting her as they both regained their balance. Petra nodded, her eyes scanning the dimly lit room. "There has to be a way out of here. The Zor wouldn't build a chamber like this without an emergency exit." They began to search the walls, their hands running over the smooth surfaces, looking for any sign of a hidden panel or mechanism. The station groaned around them, the sound of twisting metal echoing through the structure. "Here!" Petra called out, her fingers catching on a slight indentation. "I think I've found something." Dennis hurried over, examining the area Petra had discovered. Together, they applied pressure to the panel, feeling it give way slightly. With a final push, the section of wall slid aside, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel. "Good work," Dennis said, flashing Petra a quick smile. "Ladies first?" Petra chuckled despite their dire situation. "Such a gentleman. Let's go." They entered the tunnel, the tight space forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees. The air grew thinner as they progressed, and the sounds of the failing station became more muffled. As they navigated the cramped passageway, Dennis's mind raced with the implications of what they had learned. The Quorin test, the Zor's hidden agenda, the potential for interspecies cooperation. It was almost too much to process, but right now, survival was their primary concern. Suddenly, the tunnel ahead of them collapsed, blocking their path with a pile of twisted metal and debris. Dennis and Petra exchanged a worried glance. "We'll have to find another way," Dennis said, starting to turn back. But Petra held up a hand, her eyes narrowing as she examined the blockage. "Wait, I think I see something beyond this debris. If we can move some of these smaller pieces, we might be able to squeeze through." Working together, they carefully shifted the debris, creating a small opening. It was tight, but it seemed just large enough for them to pass through. Dennis went first, inching his way through the gap. Sharp edges scraped against his uniform, but he pushed on, emerging on the other side with a grunt of effort. He turned back to help Petra, guiding her through the narrow space. As Petra cleared the opening, another tremor shook the station. The debris shifted, threatening to close the gap behind them. They scrambled forward, barely avoiding being crushed as the tunnel collapsed. "That was too close," Petra said, her breath coming in short gasps. Dennis nodded, helping her to her feet. "But we made it. And look, I think we're getting close to the outer sections of the station." Ahead of them, the tunnel widened into a larger maintenance shaft. They could see flickering emergency lights in the distance, suggesting they were nearing more populated areas of the station. As they moved forward, the sound of voices reached their ears. At first, Dennis tensed, worried it might be Zor security forces. But as they drew closer, he recognized the mix of human and Pakled languages. "It's the rescue teams," he said, relief evident in his voice. They quickened their pace, following the sounds of the rescue operation. The shaft eventually led them to a sealed bulkhead. Beyond it, they could hear the commotion of the evacuation efforts. Dennis examined the door's control panel, his brow furrowing. "The locking mechanism is fused. We can't open it from this side." Petra joined him at the panel, her eyes scanning the circuitry. "Maybe we can reroute the power. If we can generate a surge in the right circuit, it might override the lock." They set to work, Petra guiding Dennis through the intricacies of the Zor technology. Their recent shared mental experience seemed to linger, allowing them to work in perfect synchronization. Just as they were about to attempt to trigger the override, a loud bang echoed through the shaft behind them. The station's structural integrity was failing rapidly, and the maintenance tunnels were beginning to collapse. "We're out of time," Dennis said, his voice tense. "We have to risk it." Petra nodded, her hand hovering over the final connection. "Ready?" "Do it," Dennis replied. Petra completed the circuit, sending a surge of power through the door's systems. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then with a hiss of hydraulics, the bulkhead began to slide open. Light flooded into the maintenance shaft as the door opened, revealing a chaotic scene beyond. Human and Pakled rescue teams were working side by side, coordinating the evacuation of the station's remaining occupants. Dennis and Petra stumbled out of the shaft, drawing the attention of nearby rescue workers. A human medic rushed over, supporting Petra as she swayed on her feet. "We need to speak to Captain Rodriguez and Counselor Vix immediately," Dennis said, his voice hoarse but urgent. "We have critical information about the Zor and the Quorin." As the medic began to assess their condition, alarms blared throughout the station. A nearby console flashed with a warning: multiple hull breaches detected, critical systems failing. Dennis locked eyes with Petra, both of them understanding the gravity of the situation. They had escaped the quantum computer chamber, but their ordeal was just getting started. The race to save the station and potentially reshape the future of interspecies relations was just beginning. Time seemed to slow as alarms blared and the station shuddered around them. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "There they are. Get them to the evacuation shuttle immediately." Captain Rodriguez appeared, flanked by a team of human and Pakled rescuers. Dennis and Petra found themselves swept up in the urgent flow of evacuees. As they rushed through the crumbling corridors, Dennis caught glimpses of other alien delegates being ushered to safety. He recognized Zira, the Andorian diplomat, helping an injured Tellarite. The evacuation was a blur of motion and sound. Dennis kept a firm grip on Petra's hand as they navigated the treacherous path to the docking bay. Just as they reached the final airlock, a violent tremor rocked the station. Dennis stumbled, nearly losing his footing, but Petra's strong grip kept him upright. "Almost there," she said, her voice steady despite the pandemonium. They crossed the threshold into a sleek Zor shuttle, its engines already humming with pre-launch sequences. As the airlock sealed behind them, Dennis caught a final glimpse of the dying station through a viewport. Sections were breaking apart, drifting into the void of space. The shuttle's pilot, a grim-faced Pakled, initiated the launch sequence. With a lurch, they detached from the doomed station and rocketed away. Dennis and Petra strapped themselves into adjacent seats, their hands still linked. As they sped towards the human flagship, Dennis felt a mix of relief and trepidation wash over him. They had escaped, but what awaited them? How would their actions be received? Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the shuttle's comm system. "Dennis, Petra, I'm ordering you to dock immediately. We have some questions that need answering." Dennis exchanged a look with Petra. Her expression mirrored his own uncertainty, but there was also a glimmer of perseverance in her eyes. The docking procedure was swift and efficient. As soon as the shuttle was secure, a team of security officers boarded. Dennis and Petra were quickly separated, each led to different debriefing rooms. Hours passed as Dennis recounted every detail of their experience in the quantum computer chamber. He explained about the Quorin test, the Zor's hidden agenda, and the critical data they had managed to transmit before shutting down the system. When he was finally released, Dennis found Petra waiting for him in a quiet corridor. She looked tired but relieved. "They believe us," she said, her voice low. "The other delegates, including Zira, confirmed our story. They're calling us heroes." Dennis shook his head, still processing the information. "Heroes? We were just trying to survive." Before Petra could respond, a junior officer approached them. "Excuse me, but Captain Rodriguez requests your presence on the bridge immediately. There's been a development." As they followed the officer, Dennis noticed the heightened activity throughout the ship. Crew members moved with purpose, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. The bridge was a hive of activity when they arrived. Captain Rodriguez stood at the center, his gaze fixed on a massive view screen. As Dennis and Petra entered, he turned to face them. "Your actions have set something extraordinary in motion," Rodriguez said, his voice grave. "The data you transmitted, it's more than we could have imagined. We've only decoded a fraction of it, but what we've found is astounding." The captain gestured to the view screen, which displayed a complex network of interconnected points spread across a galactic map. "This," Rodriguez continued, "appears to be a vast Quorin network spanning the entire galaxy. The implications are, well, they're beyond anything we've encountered before." Dennis stared at the map, his legs shaking. "What does this mean for us? For Earth? For the Packleds?" Before Rodriguez could answer, a loud alarm sounded. The bridge erupted into a flurry of activity. "Captain," a sensor officer called out, "we're detecting a massive spatial disturbance. Something's coming through." All eyes turned to the view screen as a colossal ship emerged from what appeared to be a rift in space itself. It dwarfed even the largest vessels in the assembled fleet, its design unlike anything Dennis had ever seen. "It's the Quorin," Petra whispered, her eyes wide with awe. A beam of light emanated from the massive ship, projecting a holographic message that filled the bridge. A being of pure energy appeared, its form constantly shifting and flowing. "Greetings, children of Earth and Packled Prime," the being's voice resonated, not through sound but directly in their minds. "You have passed our test. Your courage, ingenuity, and capacity for cooperation have proven you worthy. We invite you to join us in the Galactic Council." The bridge fell silent, the weight of the moment settling over everyone present. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the Quorin representative. "We are honored by your invitation," he said, "but we have many questions. Who will represent us in this council?" The energy being seemed to pulse with approval. "The two who demonstrated the true spirit of cooperation and understanding," it replied. "Dennis and Petra, step forward. You shall be the joint ambassadors for your species." Dennis felt Petra's hand slip into his as they moved towards the hologram. The eyes of everyone on the bridge followed them, a mix of awe and expectation in their gazes. As they stood before the Quorin representative, Dennis felt a surge of emotions, fear, excitement, and a deep sense of responsibility. He glanced at Petra, seeing the same conflicting feelings reflected in her eyes. "Are you ready to embark on this journey?" the Quorin asked, its energy pulsing with anticipation. Dennis took a deep breath, squeezing Petra's hand. Together they nodded, stepping forward into a future neither of them could have imagined when their paths first crossed. The hologram dissipated, leaving the bridge in a state of stunned silence. Captain Rodriguez was the first to recover, turning to face the newly appointed ambassadors. "Well," he said, a hint of a smile on his face, "it seems you two have quite the task ahead of you. Let's prepare you for your first contact with the Quorin.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.